The first thing Elena Rodriguez felt was his own teeth cracking together hard enough to light his jaw with pain. Then the freighter lurched sideways as if a giant hand had swatted it out of warp. The stars didn't return in the smooth spill he expected. They snapped into place in jagged streaks, then dissolved behind static blooms and weapons glare. Every panel on his console went white-blue for half a second. The warp shell had collapsed early. Come on," he muttered, fingers already moving. The old courier boat, Wayfarer's Debt, complained in rattles and warning tones as inertial buffers fought to settle. Elena shoved one boot against the deck brace, pulled power from non-essentials, and forced his breathing into a count he'd learned 15 years ago on rescue runs where panic killed faster than fire. 1 breath in. Hold. 1 breath out. The tactical overlay repainted itself and turned his stomach cold. Siege markers bloomed in 3 alphabets: Trade Cont, Justari script, and an archaic machine code still used by mercenary nav systems. Red cones of threat vectors crossed his bow. Hostile lock pings rattled in from ships whose silhouettes didn't match any route bulletin he downloaded at Sol Point. He had jumped with replacement life support coils and 2 pallets of algae scrubber mesh, the kind of run nobody wrote songs about. Independent freight from Ceres Fringe to a border orbital where somebody else's filters had failed. Quiet pay, clean papers, 1 stop for fuel on the way home. Instead, space outside his canopy looked like a forge bursting. Rail slugs flashed past in silver needles. Missiles flowered into confetti fire. A destroyer in Justari lacquer rolled above him, trailing atmosphere and debris, its aft sections open like split fruit. "Wrong place," he said aloud, because saying it made it manageable. "Very wrong place." He was exactly the wrong man in exactly the wrong sky. Humans were tolerated inside Justari matriarchate space when they kept their heads down and moved cargo. Somebody important wanted moved. Dock labor, contracts, transit corridors, not command channels. Never war zones, especially not this one, the kind listed in red with legal phrasing that meant if you entered and vanished, nobody owed your family an explanation. The lock warning rose to a shrill, continuous tone. Elena killed engines. Everything in him hated that move. Every pilot instinct screamed to burn hard and run. But a hot drive was a flare on every combat scope in 1,000 kilometers. He cut thrust, rolled 90 degrees to present less profile, dumped heat through emergency radiators, then vented a thin jet of coolant from portside nozzles. It misted into glittering ice and drifted around the hull like debris cloud. He made his freighter look dead. A stream of tracer fire stitched past his cockpit and tore apart a tumbling cargo canister 30 meters off his nose. Fragments pinged his shields. 2 ships screamed by too fast for visual ID, one with matriarchate hull markings, one clean black with no registry at all. Elena unclenched one hand and checked his board. Oxygen reserves, 83%. Hull pressure nominal. Coil cargo intact. Medlocker 3/4 stocked. 1 suit with patched left thigh seam. Cutter charged. Portable welder charged. 2 emergency beacons. 1 escape pod that hadn't been serviced since before he bought the ship. Supplies, exits, sequence. He cataloged automatically, same way he had when rescue calls came in and station supervisors fed him bad data because they wanted their liability reports pretty. He had learned what reports were worth the night his crew died following cleared coordinates into a mining blast field that hadn't been cleared at all. Panic got crews killed. So did trust in the wrong people. A broad spectrum transmission broke across his comm, half scrambled by jamming. All civilian hulls clear Arc 9. Repeat, Clear Arc-9 or be treated as hostile. Arc-9 was exactly where he had dropped. Elena reached for Nav, intending to ghost backward on minimal thrust and pray no one noticed. Something struck his ship hard enough to throw him against the harness. The impact alarm screamed. External cameras flickered and came back with a wild image. A knife-shaped interceptor, one wing missing, had slammed into his dorsal frame and latched on with magnetic claws. Its hull was scorched to bare metal. One engine was burning from the inside out. Great, Elena breathed. Orders. He hit internal lockdown, sealed the cargo hold, and pulled the plasma cutter from the rack beside his seat. His hands were steady now. His pulse was not. On the overhead feed, a lance tube extended from the interceptor's belly, rotated, and fired. A bright cone punched through his cargo bay roof in a burst of molten spray and spinning bolts. Atmosphere vented. Crates shifted against straps. Warning symbols filled his vision until he swiped them away. He jogged aft through flickering light strips, cutter in one hand, emergency seal foam canister clipped to his belt. He expected raiders or press-ganged privateers, maybe scavs hoping to rip and run before either fleet noticed. He expected greed. What climbed through the smoking breach looked like vengeance in a torn pressure suit. Tall, lean black armor layered over dark ceram fabric gone gray with ash. A jastery crestplate cracked down the middle. Helmet gone. Blood floating in ruby beads from a rip at her side, where suit fabric had peeled open to vacuum. Elena recognized her before she focused on him. Anyone with a border feed subscription would. War Heir Sorith Kale, called the Black Spear. The matriarchate officer, every threat bulletin reduced to one line, never lost a station she chose to hold. Rumors said she executed deserters herself. Rumors said she smiled while doing it. Rumors were free in wartime. Truth cost. She raised a sidearm, then seemed to notice who she was aiming at. One startled human cargo pilot in grease-stained overalls and magnetic boots from 3 contracts ago. Her eyes, dark gold, blown wide from hypoxia, flicked over him, over the cutter, over the ruptured deck. Not dead, she rasped, voice shredded through dry throat. Useful. Before he could decide whether to be offended, she lurched forward and shoved a thumb-sized data core into his palm, hard enough to bruise. Neutral relay, sector lattice 7. She coughed, red spatter on her lip. Jump now, before line breaks. Outside, as if on cue, something enormous detonated. The freighter rang like a bell. Elena stared at the core. Military-grade crystal, encrypted cap, Justari command stamp etched at the edge and partially burned off. Worth money. Worth prison. Worth getting shot by everyone currently in orbit. Why me? He asked. Sorith bared her teeth. Maybe a laugh, maybe pain. Because you were stupid enough to be here. She took one step. Her knees buckled, and she crashed shoulder first into a cargo crate. Her sidearm clattered away. Her breath came in thin pulls that did not refill her lungs. Elena was moving before he chose to move. He dropped the cutter, caught her under one arm, and dragged her behind a strapped pallet as another impact shivered through the hull. Up close, he could see frost crystals around the suit tear and mottled skin where pressure trauma had started. Hypoxia tremors shook her hard enough to click her teeth. Stay with me, he said, then almost laughed at himself. He did not know this woman. This woman, by half the stories on the net, might have ordered civilians spaced for traffic control. This woman had just boarded his ship at Lance Point. But blood was blood. Air loss was air loss. Physics did not care about politics. He slapped a patch over the rupture, hissed sealant along the edge, and clamped it until the warning light on her suit cuff went from red to amber. She grabbed his wrist once, startlingly strong. "Leave me," she whispered. "Take core." The smart answer was yes. He could shove off from the battle, go dark, creep to a neutral lane, and live. Turn in the core anonymously. Maybe. Or dump it and never look back. Also maybe. He had survived this long by not volunteering for other people's wars. Then comm traffic bled through his ship speakers. Open channel. Unencrypted in the way panicked orders often were. Evac convoy pinned under lower batteries. Repeat, child convoy still dockside. Another voice colder. Coup wing in approach. Wing in. If Black Spear is dead, execute fallback on civilian ring. Execute fallback on civilian ring. Elena felt old anger rear up. Hot and immediate. Command people using the word fallback when they meant acceptable casualties. He had heard that tone the night Station 12 lied to his rescue crew and sent them into mind vacuum to protect a mining contract. He had buried 6 friends because someone higher up had decided numbers mattered more than names. Sorith's eyes found his face. Even half-conscious, she had heard it too. "Convoy," she said, each syllable dragged over glass. "If they breach line, they burn." He looked at the data core in his hand, then at the lockouts on his nav board, then at the blood spreading beneath her patched suit. Status quo had ended 12 minutes ago when warp dumped him into hell. Now the only question was which hell he chose. He hauled her toward the med cradle by the bulkhead and slammed a hypo into her arm from his emergency kit. Analgesic, oxygen support, clotting boost. Not enough. Better than nothing. He strapped her in before she could object and sprinted to the cockpit. Outside, 2 battle groups were tightening around the planet like fists. He opened transponder control and began lying to everyone. He spoofed his hull ID as salvage drift, then layered a Justari maintenance ping over it. Using an old rescue service script he had absolutely no legal right to possess. He bled reactor output into irregular pulses to mimic shrapnel tumble. He dumped another coolant plume and rode it like camouflage through a gap between 2 missile salvos. A ping hit his board. Unknown privateer asking claim rights. He ignored it. A second ping. Matriarchate line command querying his vector. He ignored that too. From behind him, faint and slurred, Sorith said, "Too bright on starboard. Kill 3%. Now." He glanced back. Her eyes were half-lidded, face colorless, except where blood marked her jaw, but she had tracked his thermal profile by ear. He shaved 3% heat and watched a targeting sweep pass over him without pause. "Noted," he said. "Don't sound surprised, courier." A grim smile pulled at his mouth despite everything. "I'm not a courier." "What are you?" The old answer came easy. Rescue engineer, Interstellar Corps. The real answer after Tribunal blacklisted him was uglier. Independent hauler, occasional fixer, off-book evidence collector trying to prove his former contractor had been selling poisoned warp charts to whichever side paid best. Right now, with fire-filling space and a war air bleeding in his med cradle, the answer that mattered was simpler. "Alive," he said, trying to stay that way. He angled the freighter toward the embattled planet instead of open dark. Safe space lay 1 burn away if he abandoned the siege. The neutral relay was 2 burns and a prayer through tightening killbox geometry. The planet was a knife edge between them. Dangerous, crowded, but full of signal shadow, where a small ship might disappear long enough to choose again. As he committed to the vector, his console lit with fresh alerts, bounty declarations from 2 independent contract nets. One tagged his registry as probable collaborator with Matriarch Command. Another tagged him as material witness for seizure. Both sides had decided what he was. He exhaled through his teeth and tightened the harness straps. Cargo payment no longer mattered. His old debts no longer mattered. Even his private vendetta against the contractor who'd ruined his crew had shifted shape in his mind, because now a data core sat beside his console that might connect profiteers to this entire bloodbath. Behind him, Sorith drifted in and out, issuing clipped corrections whenever his vector edged too obvious. Ahead, the planet turned slowly under siege fire, a bruised world with emergency beacons blinking along its night side like weak heartbeats. If he failed, he would die in a jurisdiction that disliked him for existing. If he succeeded, powerful humans would call him traitor for aiding an alien officer. Powerful Justari would call her compromised for trusting a human man, and neither accusation came with a long life expectancy. Elena set a new course anyway, because somewhere below those guns, a convoy full of children waited for someone with enough nerve and enough spite to break a pattern built on lies. And because one wrong warp coordinate had already stolen too much from too many people. The Wayfarer's debt shuddered as Elena dropped her into the planet's upper shadow, hull skimming through a storm of old wreckage and fresh fragments. He rode the edge of a shattered combui field, letting jagged metal and dead satellites break up his signature. Every few seconds, distant siege fire painted the cockpit in white flashes. The nav solution kept trying to correct him toward open, sane lanes. He kept overriding it by hand. "Port 6, Sorith said behind him, voice rough but steadier than before. "You're drifting into a sensor fan." He checked. She was right. Again. He bled a whisper of thrust, pivoted around a tumbling habitation panel, and slipped beneath a passing scan sweep so narrow he could almost feel it scrape paint. "How are you conscious?" "Spite." He snorted once. "Good. Keep it." Below them, the civilian ring around the planet flickered with intermittent power. Sections of habitat spun dark, others still glowed, windows lit in bands like ribs. Emergency beacons flashed in uneven cadence. As he watched, a kinetic strike hit somewhere on the far side and sent a muted ripple through the ring's atmosphere haze. His comm coughed up overlapping voices, matriarch military channels, civilian distress, pirate traffic bargaining over salvage rights like vultures fighting midair. Then a narrowband burst snapped onto his private frequency, an old encryption key he hadn't used in months. "Elena Rodriguez," said a familiar human voice, amused and oily. "You pick dramatic work zones." His spine tightened. "Not taking calls, Damas." "You should. There's an open bounty with your hull hash. 2, actually. I can clear one for you. Maybe both if you're carrying what I think you're carrying." Elena killed the channel without replying. Sorith had heard enough. "Friend of yours?" "Former broker," he said. "He sells information to anyone with a pulse and a transfer account. Useful type. Useful until he sells you." She gave a faint, humorless sound that might have been agreement, then coughed hard enough to fold around her straps. The monitor at her cradle flashed oxygen debt warnings. Elena reached back one-handed, increased flow, and kept flying. He needed atmosphere, sealant, and 10 minutes where no one was actively trying to atomize him. A maintenance spindle on the civilian ring rotated into view, marked with a half-dead transponder code and an emergency services glyph. Not a military dock, not officially open, which made it perfect. He pinged with a falsified maintenance credential. No response. He pinged again, this time broadcasting a pressure leak emergency in old rescue protocol language. After a long 5 seconds, a crackling voice answered in heavily accented, "Trade can't." "Unidentified drift vessel. Bay is sealed. We are at capacity. Divert. Elena switched to plain speech. I have one critical casualty, one decompressed cargo section, and minimal drive heat. If I don't dock in the next 3 minutes, your outer ring gets one more drifting coffin to dodge. Silence. Then, transmit med profile. He glanced at Soreth. She was already shaking her head, fierce despite the blood loss. No profile, Elena said. You want me stable and gone, you open now. Another pause. In the background, he heard people arguing. Then the shriek of stressed metal over comm pickup. Bay 12, the controller snapped. Manual cycle only. You get 8 minutes and no trouble. Bless ya, Elena said, and cut transmission before they could reconsider. He nudged the freighter into the spindle throat with centimeters to spare, landing skids scraping an access rail. Atmosphere blew around the hull as emergency doors cycled behind him. The moment pressure equalized enough for movement, he was out of the seat. He unstrapped Soreth. She tried to stand and nearly went down. He took her weight without comment. Up close, she felt too light for someone with her reputation. You tell them who you are, he murmured. This turns into politics. It already is politics. Then let me manage this part. The bay doors cracked open to reveal a crew of 6 in patchwork pressure gear, all armed with industrial tools that could become weapons in a heartbeat. Their leader, a broad-shouldered Justari woman with a silver docking badge, froze when she saw Soreth's face. Every expression in the bay changed at once. Fear, anger, awe, calculation. The dockmaster dropped to one knee so abruptly her wrench clanged on deck. War air. Soreth swayed but remained upright. Rise, dockmaster. I am not here as title. I need med access and a secure uplink. The dockmaster stood, eyes cutting to Elena with naked suspicion. And the human? Is under my protection, Soreth said. That did not improve anyone's comfort, but it got them moving. They transferred Soreth to a triage cot, while Elena sealed his cargo breach with foam and scrap plating, hands flying through motions he'd done in smoke, flood, and vacuum 100 times. One of the dock techs shadowed him close enough to stab. Elena ignored him and kept welding. Alarms rose through the spindle structure, low at first, then urgent. The dockmaster's comm unit barked in Justari. She paled, looked to Soreth, then to Elena. House Torv on patrol at Outer Lock. They demand custody of compromised command asset and foreign accomplice. They have override codes. Soreth's jaw hardened. My aunt moves quickly. Elena looked up from the glowing seam. Your aunt? Admiral Vera Kale, she said, as if naming weather. She will call this a recovery operation. It is an execution. The dockmaster swallowed. War air. If they force the lock, then they kill everyone who saw me arrive, Soreth finished, and blame raid damage. Elena killed the welder. How long till override? 6 minutes. He stood, wiped sweat off his chin with the back of his glove, and scanned the bay. Old service ducts, 2 tug drones, 1 external fuel line feeding auxiliary generators. He could work with Ugly. Dockmaster, he said, pointing. Can your drones push mass? Cargo pods, yes. Good. I need 1 loaded with metallic scrap and 1 with your hottest reactor waste. Strap beacons on both. Spoof them as this hull and her escort. Kick them out opposite vectors when the outer lock opens. The dockmaster stared. Decoys. Loud decoys. He nodded at the fuel manifold. And when they breach, vent that line into Bay 12 and spark it. Big plume. Lots of thermal junk. Their scopes will see chaos, not us. Soreth pushed up on one elbow, pain making her voice sharp. And where do we go? Elena pointed overhead. Maintenance spine. My ship can't outrun patrol ships in clean lanes, but we can crawl under the ring and jump from the dark side. The dockmaster hesitated, one heartbeat too long. Sorith fixed her with a commander's stare that could cut steel. Do it. What followed was 8 minutes of controlled disaster. Elena and 2 techs rerouted docking power through manual relays while someone else dragged scrap into a drone cradle. Sorith, IV line still taped to her arm, sat at a terminal and fed false command packets into local traffic, her fingers trembling only when she stopped typing. Overcom, House Torvin voices grew louder, more certain, citing authority in clipped legal formulas that sounded like knives wrapped in silk. At override, -10 seconds, Elena sprinted back to the cockpit and sealed in. Launch decoys, he snapped. Outside, one drone shot from Bay 12, radiating Elena's transponder like a flare. The second followed with a heat signature almost identical to a damaged interceptor. Now burn the manifold. A bloom of white-hot vapor exploded across the bay mouth, just as Torvain's lock forced open. Sensors went blind in glittering static and boiling gas. Elena gunned short thrust, skated Wayfarer's debt sideways through a maintenance aperture meant for utility crawlers, and scraped half his starboard plating off on the way through. Someone fired. The rounds rang off his hull like hail. Then they were inside the ring's skeleton. Narrow truss tunnels, rotating shadows, signal clutter thick as mud. Elena didn't breathe until the first barrage missed them by a full kilometer. They stayed in the maintenance maze for 42 brutal minutes, crawling by bursts, drifting cold when patrol scans swept overhead. Sorith lay strapped behind him, conscious now, silent except for occasional vectors, and one quiet instruction to lower cabin lights, because bright glare made her tremors worse. At last, the ring fell behind them, and the neutral relay came into view. A spindle of mirrored arrays parked at the edge of contested space, treaty-protected and perpetually one insult away from being bombed by everyone. Its beacon pulsed. No weapons, no sovereign claims. Data sanctuary. Sanctuary, Elena muttered. Sure. Approach control challenged them 3 times, demanded disarm status, then assigned them a quarantine berth so far from the main axis it felt like exile. Fine by him. The instant clamps took hold. Elena pulled the data core from his pocket and set it on the console between them. Burn marks scarred one edge. Justari command cipher glimmered beneath soot. Sorith reached for it and stopped, hand hovering. If this is what I think, opening it here triggers audits. Good, Elena said. I want audits. She studied him. Most people in your position want deniability. Most people in my position don't have 2 governments bidding for their corpse. A flicker at her mouth, almost a smile. Then she keyed the relay's legal witness protocol, entered her command sigil, and nodded to him. Add yours. He hesitated. His old credential was dead, stripped after tribunal. His current registry carried no authority, but he still remembered his Interstellar Rescue Corps witness key, the one that chained statements to a specific pulse profile and made lying under oath a prison sport. He pressed his thumb to the plate. Join opening, the relay AI intoned. 2-party release. Irreversible on decrypt. Proceed? Sorith met his eyes. Proceed. The core split along a seam and projected light into the cramped cockpit. Not one file. Hundreds. Jump logs, contract chains, redacted convoy routes, payment ledgers mirrored through shell companies on both sides of the border, video clips of private meetings, audio, fragmented but clear enough. Elena felt the blood drain from his face as names scrolled. Harrow Meridian Transit, His former contractor, the one that had certified the safe coordinates that killed his rescue crew, appeared in ledger after ledger. Beside it, Kale Strategic Office, sub-branch authorized by Admiral Veyra Kale. Human profiteers and Jastari nobles had not merely benefited from chaos, they had engineered it. They seeded false warp corrections into civilian and humanitarian navigation updates, nudging relief ships, school transports, and independent haulers into active kill zones. Each tragic misjump became propaganda. Each outrage justified more contracts, more emergency powers, more monopoly control over safe routes. One file flagged lattice correction bait. Inside was his own route package from this morning, time-stamped before he ever filed flight intent. Sorth went very still. Your coordinate. He nodded once, unable to speak for a second. They put me here on purpose. To erase a witness? Or to create one more incident? He swallowed hard. Either works for them. A new file opened automatically. Projected casualty charts tied to civilian pressure events. One line item read, Evacuation convoy Delta Children's Ring with estimated losses entered as acceptable variance. Sorth made a sound Elena had never heard from her before. Small, strangled fury. They budgeted children. He thought of Station 12, of 6 caskets and polite legal language. The same math. Different uniforms. Relay alerts flared around them. Because of the witness protocol, every access had been mirrored to neutral archivists. Clock started now. Conspirators would know the leak existed within minutes, maybe less. Elena wiped both hands over his face, thinking fast. If we just dump this on channels, they'll jam, dispute, bury in legal sludge. They will call it fabricated by enemies. They already are enemies. He stared at the tactical map, at the old orbital gate marker sitting dark above the planet, like a forgotten bone. Unless we force a fact they can't spin. Sorth followed his gaze. The abandoned gate. Gate 27 still has broadcast authority baked into infrastructure. IDs obsolete but wideband. If we can power it, calibrate phase, and piggyback this data across every civil nav ping in system, they can't local jam without blinding their own fleets. She considered, command mind visibly turning despite pain and exhaustion. The gate is inside artillery reach. Yeah. It is also decompressed, unstable, and has no active maintenance crew. Also, yeah. A pause. Then Sorth straightened, as much as the med restraints allowed, and opened a command channel on full military encryption. Her voice, when it came, was the Black Spear again. Cold, precise, impossible to ignore. This is War Heir Sorth Kyle. Priority Iron. I am alive. I hold verified evidence of internal treason and cross-border war profiteering. All units loyal to matriarch law will disengage from House Torvain directives and rally on Gate 27 for civilian extraction operation under Provisional Joint Command. She glanced at Elena as she said the next words. Engineering lead, Elena Rodriguez, independent human specialist under my authority. Any challenge to his access is challenge to mine. Comms exploded with overlapping responses. Shock, protest, formal acknowledgement, accusations of coercion. Sorth cut them all and looked at him, eyes bright with pain and decision. You wanted audits, she said. Now, we have a war inside a war. Can you make that gate speak before my aunt kills us both? Elena picked up the opened core, slid it into a hardened case, and locked it to his belt. Yes, he said. But we're going to need more hands, less pride, and a miracle with wiring. Outside the relay viewport, ships were already changing vector. Outside the relay viewport, Ships were already changing vector. Some peeled away from the siege line and arced toward Gate 27 in disciplined wedges, Sorith's loyalists, if her authority still held. Others accelerated harder, transponders masked or carrying House Torvain colors bold as a challenge. A third group came in ragged and greedy. Independent guns, and contract hunters, anyone who smelled a payout. The relay AI chimed, sterile and calm. Warning, neutrality protocols under stress. Armed convergence exceeds treaty threshold. Elena was already strapping in. That's one way to say stampede. Sorith rose from the med couch too quickly and had to brace a hand on the console until the dizziness passed. She ignored Elena's look and keyed a tight beam packet at fleet speed. Rally point stands. No fire within relay perimeter. A new transmission slammed into every channel before her order finished. Admiral Vera Coyle's face appeared in the holofield, older than Sorith by 20 years, elegant in formal command armor. Her expression held grief, polished into weapon shape. "Daughters of the matriarchate," Vera said, voice carrying the cadence of courtroom proof. "War heir Sorith Kale has been compromised during enemy capture. A human smuggler currently coercing her possesses fabricated data intended to fracture lawful defense. By emergency right, I assume strategic custody. All loyal houses, intercept and recover my niece. Minimize hull damage. The human is expendable." The feed cut to edited clips. Elena, with a cutter in hand near a smoking hull breach. Sorith collapsed, Elena dragging her. Out of context, it looked exactly like abduction. "Fast edit," Elena muttered. She had this package ready. "She had contingencies for my death and discredit both," Sorith said, jaw tight. "Now she uses the second." Another hail arrived, this one from Relay Administration. "Unidentified vessel wayfarer's debt. Under competing legal claims, we are required to impound disputed intelligence pending tribunal." Elena barked a laugh, with no humor in it. "They want us parked, while everyone else writes the story." Sorith's eyes narrowed. "Not happening." She switched to command band and spoke with clipped authority. "Any unit still honoring my seal, form escort shell around Wayfarer's debt. We depart now." Static answered first. Then, one by one, acknowledgements. Not many. Enough to be noticed. The relay clamps released with a shudder. Elena kicked thrust. Their freighter slid clear as 3 Jastari corvettes dropped into formation around them, joined by a civilian tug refitted with point defense cannons and, unexpectedly, the battered Spindle Dockmaster's shuttle from earlier, its hull still scorched, its pilot patched through. "Dockmaster Terran, I brought welders and 2 people too stubborn to stay hidden." Elena grinned despite the knot in his throat. "Good to hear your voice." "Don't get sentimental, human. I still dislike you." Behind them, Torvain ships crossed the relay boundary and fired anyway. Neutrality alarms screamed. White lances stabbed through vacuum. One relay mirror array shattered into glittering debris, and with it, any pretense that treaties still mattered. Gate 27 hung above the planet like a dead crown. 20 kilometers of skeletal ring and dormant spindle, abandoned after a resonance accident decades ago. Its once gold lattice was blackened and pitted, sections sealed off with warning beacons that had long since lost power. Around it drifted service hulks, old maintenance pods, and a graveyard of forgotten hardware. Elena brought Wayfarer's debt in under the gate's lower arc while escort ships spread to screen incoming fire. The tactical display was a fever chart. Vera's task force tightening from high orbit, privateers circling for angle, loyalist units trying to hold a corridor to the civilian ring where evacuation transports clustered like frightened fish. Status, Elena said. Sorith stood beside him now, pale but steady, one hand pressed to her bandaged side. Convoy Delta still docked. Their shields are failing under intermittent bombardment. If we do not open corridor soon, they either burn in port or launch blind through artillery. Any chance your aunt blinks? No. Didn't think so. He pinged local frequencies. All engineering crews. This is Rodriguez aboard Wayfarer's Det. We need phase vanes inspected, field coils tested, and manual spindle access mapped yesterday. If you can hold a wrench and vacuum, check in. Voices answered. Human mechanics from merchant hulls, Jastery ship techs, one station electrician who admitted she had never touched a gate and sounded insulted when Elena thanked her anyway. Mixed accents, mixed grudges, all busy. For 12 furious minutes, it worked. Teams fanned across the dead structure on tethers and mag boots. Sorith's Marines posted at choke nodes. Elena crawled through Gate 27's control spine with Dockmaster Terran and a teenage coder from the tug, bypassing fossilized safeties and replacing burned relay plates with whatever conductive scrap they had. He shoved aside fatigue and moved on pattern recognition, muttering values under his breath. Primary phase stacks responding, Terran called from the next junction. Coherence? Ugly, but alive. That was as good as prayer. Then Vera escalated. A burst packet hit every open channel, seeded with military authentication codes and a human corporate legal stamp Elena recognized with instant nausea. Harrow Meridian Transit. The message declared Gate 27 a terrorist seizure site and authorized containment by any allied asset. Simultaneously, a bounty multiplier went live on contract nets. Tenfold payout for recovery of the data core, additional bonuses for live capture of Elena Rodriguez, proof of kill accepted. Privateer vectors multiplied like infection. Worse, Harrow pushed a nav update to civilian lanes, an emergency reroute that quietly shifted evacuation trajectories 10 degrees into the siege guns. Elena saw it in the traffic map and swore hard. They're poisoning routes in real time. Sorith heard him over comm and went cold. Patch me to all civilian traffic. You won't reach all of them through jamming. Then I reach enough. She came on to open band in 3 languages, voice raw and authoritative. Disregard all Harrow Meridian route advisories. Repeat, disregard. Hold station until authenticated corridor opens. Any pilot accepting unsanctioned correction is entering a kill box by design. Some answered with frightened acknowledgement. Others did not. One empty cargo tug used as a launch marshal for the evac berths panicked under the spoofed alert and kicked free on autopilot, following the fake reroute. It lasted 40 seconds before a rail strike cut it into spinning fire. The channel filled with alarm tones and shouted course corrections, then static. Elena closed his eyes for one beat, then forced them open. We're out of time. I'm initiating gatewake sequence. No one argued. He keyed the startup from the old control pit. For 3 heartbeats, Gate 27 responded. Ancient capacitors thudded online. The ring's inner channels glowed dull amber, then brighter. Power readings climbed through tolerable into dangerous. Elena rode the curve, trimming input, trying to nurse coherence before anything blew. Phase alignment 40%, Terran said. 42, Elena corrected. Keep. The world went white. A sabotage routine hidden in the gate firmware triggered at threshold load, likely dormant for years and rearmed remotely the instant they brought systems alive. Magnetic containment inverted. Plasma vented through a maintenance branch where 6 EVA techs were anchored. Elena watched, helpless, as their biosigns vanished from his board in a cascading line of red X's. Shockwave tore through the spindle. Wayfarer's Det slammed against its moorings. Across the net, People shouted, some in pain, some in fury, some just naming the dead over and over as if repetition could reverse physics. "Taryn," Elena yelled. No answer. He ripped off his gloves and plunged bare fingers into an access panel, forcing a hard cut on the feed lines before thermal runaway jumped segments. Metal scorched his skin. He didn't feel it until later. Power died. The gate went dark again, and 6 people were still dead. They pulled survivors into a half-pressurized service bay and sealed the hatch with a cargo plate. Emergency lights painted everyone in bad red. The air smelled like coolant, blood, and burnt polymer. Elena sat on an overturned toolkit with his hands in a basin of numbing gel, staring at nothing. His palms were blistered in angry white crescents. A medic drone hovered, insisting on deeper treatment. He waved it away until it left. Across the bay, body bags lay in a row, boots still visible beneath one zipper that hadn't closed right. Dockmaster Taryn was among them. Sorith entered quiet, without entourage. She had changed bandages and somehow found a clean command jacket, though blood had already soaked through near her ribs again. She stopped beside him and looked at his hands. "Those burns need graft paste. Later." She followed his line of sight to the bags. For a moment, her face did something he had never seen. Not hardness, not command composure, just naked grief. "I ordered them onto that hull," she said. "We both did." "You gave them risk. I gave them reason." He laughed once, harsh. "Is that supposed to make either of us feel better?" "No." Silence settled, broken only by distant impacts through the station frame. Elena finally spoke, voice rough. "I knew there'd be losses. I told myself that before we started. But I missed that routine. I should have checked legacy firmware pathways before threshold. You had 11 minutes and half a crew. I still missed it." He scrubbed his good wrist across his eyes and hated that it shook. "This is exactly how it starts, Sorith. A necessary rush, a justified shortcut, then names and bags, then command says regrettable, and moves on." She crouched in front of him despite the pain it clearly cost, bringing herself eye level. "I do not move on," she said. "Do not confuse survival with indifference." He met her gaze, anger and exhaustion tangling. "Can you still command this? Honestly?" A beat passed. Her answer came too fast to be rehearsed. "I do not know." He blinked. Sorith leaned back against a bulkhead and closed her eyes. When she spoke again, her voice had lost all parade ground iron. "When I was 13, my mother sent me to watch a dock strike on Coil Prime," she said. "Workers refusing unsafe shifts. The household lesson was power. How to break resistance quickly before it spreads. I watched security drones stun a line of women old enough to be my grandmothers. One had a child strapped to her chest. The child stopped breathing before medics arrived." She pressed thumb and forefinger to the bridge of her nose. "That night, I told my mother fear was a crude instrument. She said crude instruments build empires." Elena said nothing. "I built my command reputation on certainty because uncertainty gets eaten in my court," she continued. "I punished deserters, not rumors, truth. I chose examples over mercy because I believed fear could hold a front long enough for civilians to clear. Sometimes it did. Sometimes it made monsters who only obeyed terror." Her golden eyes lifted to his, wet but unspilled. "My aunt taught me every move I use in battle, every ruthless efficiency. If I take emergency dictatorship powers after this, I become her with better intentions and the same methods. Perhaps worse, because I will call it necessity." For the first time since he had met her, she looked afraid. Convoy Delta, she whispered. There are 800 children in that ring. If I fail them, all my speeches about law and restraint are theater. Elena let out a long breath he felt in his bones. He set his burned hands carefully on his knees and leaned forward until their foreheads almost touched. You're not her, he said. You're here, in this bay, with the dead, not hiding numbers in a report. A brittle smile touched her mouth. You have very low standards for comfort. Occupational hazard. She laughed once, and it cracked into a hitching inhale. Then she did something that would have shocked half the sector. She reached out, took his damaged hand gently between both of hers, and held on like it anchored her. They stayed that way until alarms changed pitch. The crisis came in layers. First, tactical. 3 Torvane cruisers dropped from high orbit in a converging dive and opened sustained fire on the Loyalist screen. Sorith's defenders bent, then started to break. 1 corvette spun away, venting atmosphere, crew ejections sparkling behind it. Second, informational. The neutral relay, under armed pressure, announced its archives were temporarily inaccessible pending integrity review. In plain language, public access to the legally mirrored witness record was being throttled behind legal fog and jamming. Elena still carried the only immediately broadcast-capable field copy on his belt. Third, catastrophic. Admiral Vera, broadcast on all bands with full maternal sorrow and formal legal force. Niece, she said, face huge on every display. You are wounded and manipulated. Return to my custody and I will spare your accomplices. Refuse, and I will neutralize Gate 27 in 26 minutes to prevent enemy exploitation. Civilian collateral is on your conscience. Behind her words, missile racks unfolded on the dreadnought Oath of Glass. Sorith keyed response. You fire on this gate, you kill your own people and expose your treason. Vera's expression didn't change. History is written by survivors. She cut transmission. As if choreographed, Harrow Meridian pushed another fake evacuation alert into civilian networks. Immediate launch required. Hostile boarding imminent. Panicked transports began undocking from the ring in disordered streams. Damn it, Elena said, yanking up their trajectories. They're stampeding them right into the batteries. How long until first convoy enters kill envelope? Sorith asked. A junior analyst answered before Elena could. Her voice shook. 17 minutes war air. 17. Elena ran to the gate schematic, overlaying damage reports. The sabotage blast had fused 2 of 3 remote phase actuators and blown half the control relays. Remote restart was dead. Clean repair would take hours they did not have. He heard himself say, very calmly, only one path left. Sorith was already beside him. Say it. We replaced the burned phase vanes manually from inside the spindle. Physical alignment by hand. No automation. Under fire? Under everything. He zoomed a power chart. And, because relay trunks are gone, we need a live reactor bridge to push enough current for aperture bloom. I can route from Wayfarer's debt if I sit on the coupling and babysit the load. A Marine captain swore softly. That spindle is decompressed and unstable. Anyone in there cooks if thermal spikes. Elena nodded. Yeah. Outside, another Loyalist ship broke apart in silent light. The countdown clock ticked. 15:42. Sorith looked at the map, then at him. Whatever vulnerability he had seen in the service bay folded away, not gone, but banked into purpose. I can hold a defensive arc for maybe 12 minutes with what remains, she said. After that, we drown. I only need 10, Elena lied. She caught it anyway. Their eyes held for a fraction too long in the chaos. Then Sorth straightened and switched to command-wide broadcast. All surviving units, this is Sorth Kale. Final operation begins now. We are opening Gate 27 manually for civilian extraction. Every gun not physically broken will cover spindle sectors red through gold. Any ship blocking convoy lanes is hostile regardless of flag. She muted channel and softer to Elena. If this fails, don't, he said. Her hand brushed his sleeve once, quick as current. Come back from the spindle, Elena Rodriguez, that is an order. Missile warnings lit every screen at once. The first volley from Oath of Glass was already inbound. Impact in 9, the analyst shouted. Elena was running before the count hit 7. He clipped his tether to the spindle rail, mag boots sparking as he crossed from Wayfarer's Det into Gate 27's maintenance throat. Behind him came a blunt line of volunteers in patch suits, 2 human riggers, 3 Justari Marines, 1 civilian electrician named Pasha, who kept cursing in 3 languages and carrying twice her body weight in tools. Outside the gate's ribs, space lit up as Sorth's defenders met Vera's missiles. The first detonations came as pressureless thunder through metal, a low bone hum that made teeth ache. Rodriguez, Sorth's voice snapped in his helmet, clear despite interference. You have 12 minutes before my arc collapses. You promised me 12 last time too. Then stop wasting them. He dropped into the spindle cavity and almost retched at the heat. The sabotage blast had warped half the inner braces into black, gleaming arcs. Burned phase vanes jutted like broken fins around the core channel. Team 1, port rack, Elena barked. Team 2 with me on starboard vane assembly. No heroics. If your suit thermal climbs past orange, you pull out even if I swear at you. Pasha snorted. You're already swearing, boss. They worked in brutal, cramped choreography. Bolts fused by plasma had to be cut, tapped, and spun free by hand. Each replacement vane had to be seated within fractions of a degree, or the aperture would shear itself apart on bloom. Elena called numbers. The teenage coder from the tug read old schematics over comm, with his voice shaking, but accurate. Outside, Sorth commanded like a blade. Corvette Luminous Dat, rotate and cover civilian lane 2. Do not chase kills. Marine battery, ignore Torvane taunts and hold your line. Any pilot firing through evac vectors will face tribunal charges under my seal. Then, cutting through all channels, Vera again. Calm, relentless. Niece, you are spending loyal blood on a human mechanic's delusion. Stand down and I will preserve house dignity in the record. Elena heard Sorth inhale once. You taught me to preserve house above truth, she said. Today, I choose truth. A beat of static. Then, Vera's voice dropped all pretense of antly sorrow. Then, die with your pet witness. A kinetic strike smashed somewhere close enough that Elena's visor flashed from shock. Warning glyphs exploded across his display. Thermal surge, Pasha yelled. Core channel climbing. Elena wedged his shoulder under a vane bracket and shoved. Because remote sinks are dead. Keep moving. At 51% alignment, one of the human riggers screamed. His tether had snagged on a jagged brace just as a microburst of superheated gas vented from the conduit. Elena lunged, grabbed the man's harness ring, and hauled him free with both burned hands. Pain lanced up his arms so hard his vision grayed. Out! Elena gasped. Medbay now. I can still... Out! The rigger kicked off, guided by a Marine. Elena turned back before fear could finish forming. Alignment? 54, Pasha said. And your starboard set is drifting. He looked. She was right. One vane seated 0.5 millimeter shallow, enough to kill them all if he ignored it. He slammed a pry bar into the housing, and leaned his full weight until the lock ring clicked home. 56, the coder said. Rodriguez, if we don't energize soon, the civilian convoy will launch blind. As if on cue, civilian traffic filled comms, panicked captains crying children, docking officers screaming contradictory instructions while Harrow spoof feeds kept trying to overwrite them. Elena keyed ship channel. Soreth, we're not making full remote. Need live bridge now. Do it. He kicked back to Wayfarer's deck in 3 long pulls, dropped into his cockpit and stripped a panel off the reactor governor. Cables as thick as his wrist waited behind blast shielding. He swallowed. If I tie this direct, there's no automated trip. Meaning? Asked the analyst. Meaning, if load spikes, it cooks me before it trips. Silence, except distant gunfire. Then Soreth, very quiet. Elena. Don't. He jammed the coupling leads into his suit interface ports, 1 at each forearm. His display filled with biosignal overlays and reactor load equations. You hold the sky, I hold the wire. He engaged. The world turned to white pain and numbers. Power surged from freighter core through his suit, across his nervous system, into Gate 27's dead bus, as if he were a piece of deliberate machinery. Every muscle locked, his jaw clamped so hard it felt like the opening moment of the misjump all over again. Teeth slamming, bone ringing. Load stable at 62, he heard himself say through a throat that didn't feel like his own. Bring me phase. Inside the spindle, Pasha and the Marines muscled final veins into place while Elena balanced current by instinct and engineering memory. Too little, and the gate would stutter closed. Too much, and the spindle would flash to plasma. 74 alignment, the coder shouted. 78. Outside, Soreth's line began to break. One loyalist cruiser vanished in a silent blossom under oath of glass broadside fire. Evac transports started drifting from the ring, engines flaring in fear. Vera came back on open band, voice triumphant. Observe, niece. Your civilians die because you hesitated. Soreth answered like iron, dragged over stone. All convoy captains, hold for my mark. Hold. Elena's biosigns stuttered red. Heart rhythm, irregular, neural burn warning stacked. 91 alignment, Pasha yelled. Last lock jammed. Elena ripped one coupling loose, sparks tearing across his glove, and physically rerouted load to starboard branches. He felt skin split under the suit seal. Manual override spindle C. Hit it. I can't reach. He was already moving, half blind. He slammed his shoulder into the manual lever assembly, felt cartilage pop, and forced it down with a strangled shout. Alignment 99. Do it, Soreth roared. Elena drove full current. Gate 27 woke like a star being born. Light raced around the ring in blinding bands. Space in the aperture folded, shuttered, then snapped open into a stable corridor of blue-white depth. At the same instant, Elena hit transmit on the data core integration packet he'd primed an hour earlier. Instead of a local burst, the gate's resurrected broadcast authority screamed it system-wide. Every military channel, civil net, merchant nav feed, neutral archive mirror, an open public band. Raw ledgers, route tampering logs, voice prints, payment chains, Vera's authorizations, Harrow Meridian contracts, casualty forecasts with children listed as acceptable variants. No one could claim they hadn't seen it. The evidence was now inside the same navigation backbone every ship depended on. Corridor open, the analyst cried. Convoy Delta, launch now, launch now. Transports poured through the gate, first in ragged desperation, then in disciplined streams as Soreth's surviving escorts folded around them. Missiles chased, defense fire intercepted, debris spun like shrapnel rain. Elena sagged against the console, still wired to a reactor that wanted to eat him alive. Soreth, he whispered, voice shredded. Get them through. Only if you disconnect, you stubborn. A scream of alarms cut her off. Reactor loads spiked beyond red as Wayfarer's det took glancing fire. If he let go too soon, aperture collapse would bisect whatever convoy remained in transit. He bared his teeth and held. Vera did not collapse when exposed. She adapted. The moment the data dump hit public channels, she killed fleet-wide encryption, switched to legacy command ciphers only old house captains still carried, and ordered an immediate decapitation strike. Destroy Gate 27, seize Soreth alive if possible, and vaporize Wayfarer's det, regardless of civilian traffic. Harrow insertion teams. Execute purge protocol, she added on a channel she believed private. Elena heard it anyway because the teenage coder had piggybacked Gate broadcast into command spillover and fed it into every headset nearby. Purge protocol means wiping relay archives, the kid said, horrified. They're trying to erase legal mirrors. Soreth's breath hissed over comm. Then we make new mirrors from live capture. Patch me to Oath of Glass. She opened a direct hail while still dogfighting through debris. Vera answered, not from a secure bunker but from her dreadnought bridge, every officer visible behind her. Aunt, Soreth said, using the family word like a blade. You ordered civilian routes poisoned. You budgeted children. Stand down and submit to joint warrant. Vera smiled, small and pitying. I built the border you inherited. I kept our people alive while sentimental fools debated ethics. You think a few ledgers frighten me? History forgives victory. She cut the channel and fired again. A Torvain cruiser dove under its own missile wake and rammed the gate perimeter, trying to destabilize the aperture. Soreth rolled her flagship across its nose, took the hit on reinforced plating, and returned fire point blank. The cruiser split and spun away burning, but the impact rippled Gate 27's field. Transit coherence dropping, Pasha yelled from the spindle. If it falls below 60, corridor tears. Elena could barely see. I'm still on bridge. Hold it with local injectors. I need power you don't have. He looked at his board. One option left. Dump Wayfarer's det's reserve fuel cells directly into gate stabilizers. It would leave his ship dead in space and maybe explode beside him. It would also buy 3 minutes. He thumbed the release. Take it. Current surged. Pain became a distant, roaring coastline. Out near the convoy, Vera shifted again. Smart. Vicious. She stopped trying to blast through Soreth's screen and instead targeted civilian transports still forming up at the ring, betting Soreth would break defense to chase. Soreth did not chase. She broadcast to every ship, allied and hostile alike. Any captain firing on marked civilian hulls is now in violation of tri-system war law. Your transponders are recording, so are mine. Then she split her remaining forces with surgical precision, half holding Vera's spear point, half escorting stragglers to the gate. She took personal command of a fast strike wing and burned straight for Oath of Glass. Elena, she said on private comm, breath fast from acceleration. Keep that aperture alive for 8 more minutes. Planning to ask your aunt nicely? I am done asking. The strike wing hit Oath of Glass under its shield lip, where old design seams met retrofit plates. Soreth had helped design those retrofits years ago. She knew exactly where to cut. Her ships hammered the seam with synchronized bursts. Not enough to destroy the dreadnought, enough to blind its forward arrays and jam missile coordination for 20 precious seconds. Then, Soreth launched boarding pods. Vira's Marines met them in the corridors with disciplined brutality. Helmet feeds flickered across shared tactical nets, muzzle flashes in narrow halls, zero-G grapples, blood droplets spinning like garnets. Sarith fought through her own house guards, taking a strike across her shoulder plate and returning one hard enough to crack a visor. She reached the bridge doors and found them sealed. "Charges," she ordered. "Too thick," her captain replied. "We'll take—" Sarith ripped off her gauntlet, pressed bleeding fingers to the biometric override she had been assigned as heir years ago, and snarled an old household command phrase Elena did not understand. The lock hesitated, then opened. Bridge combat lasted less than a minute and felt like an hour. Veyra's personal guard went down one by one. Veyra herself stood at tactical, pistol in hand, posture immaculate amid chaos. "So," she said, leveling the weapon at Sarith, "you learned to breach. I learned to stop pretending cruelty is strategy." Veyra fired. Sarith pivoted. The round scored her already damaged side. Sarith closed distance and struck Veyra's wrist. The pistol spun away, magnet clanging to deck. For one suspended second, they faced each other. Teacher and student, aunt and niece, mirrored eyes. "You could still rule," Veyra hissed. "Take emergency powers, silence the human, blame me for excess, and keep the throne." Sarith's chest heaved. "No." She keyed her comm to full public band and said, voice shaking but clear, "This is Sarith Kyle. Admiral Veyra Kale is under arrest by joint wartime warrant for treason, civilian targeting, and collusion in route manipulation killings. I am relinquishing emergency autocratic claim pending civilian tribunal." Veyra went still, as if struck harder than any blow. "You would hand our bloodline to clerks? I would hand law back to people who bury the dead." Behind her, Marines locked Veyra in restraints. The older woman's face hardened into something brittle and furious. "Then, may they devour you." "Perhaps," Sarith said, "but not today." Back at Gate 27, the last civilian transport cleared the aperture just as Elena's reactor bridge finally failed. The coupling blew. He tore free and slammed against the console, half conscious. "Convoy clear," the analyst shouted. "All marked child transports accounted for." Applause broke across channels, wild, disbelieving, mixed with sobs and static. And then another voice, human, oily, trying to run. Damus on a secure Harrow link, yelling for extraction as relay marshals cut his ship from dock and froze his accounts under emergency fraud seizure. No one came for him. Within minutes, neutral authorities, emboldened now that evidence saturated every public net, issued synchronized holds on Harrow Meridian assets across 3 systems. Relay archivists restored mirror access under armed civilian observer teams. Fleet captains who had hesitated now switched sides in visible waves. Veyra's task force did not surrender gracefully. Pockets fought, then fractured when their own crews began receiving the casualty projections and payment ledgers on personal devices. By the time Elena was pulled from his cockpit, the war had not ended, but the lie driving it had, and that changed everything. Elena woke to pressure, antiseptic, and a ceiling he didn't recognize. He tried to sit up. A medic hand shoved him gently back down. "Do that again, and I sedate you." "Where?" "Field hospital barge attached to the civilian ring. You're alive. Don't make me prove it twice." His throat hurt. His arms were wrapped from wrist to elbow in graft mesh. A monitor beeped arrhythmia warnings that made him want to throw something. Beyond the med curtain, voices layered, human and Justari, civilians and soldiers, arguing over manifests, family reunifications, legal observers, food distribution. Crisis had shifted from explosions to logistics. He lay still and let that sound wash over him. Work, not panic. The curtain hissed aside. Sarith stepped in wearing a sling and fresh bandage under a plain dark uniform stripped of air insignia. She looked exhausted, furious, relieved, and somehow younger without the crest plate. "You disobeyed an order," she said. He managed a cracked smile. "You gave a bad one." She stared at him for 2 beats, then sat carefully on the edge of a supply crate, hands clenched to stop their tremor. "Vera is in neutral custody with external monitors. Harrow Meridian representatives are in chains in 6 ports and hiding in 12 more. Damas accepted protective detainment in exchange for testimony." "Coward. Useful coward," he nodded. "Convoy." "Clear. All child transports counted. Losses elsewhere?" Her jaw tightened. "Too many. Not that convoy." For a while, neither spoke. Then a chime sounded overhead and every screen in the ward switched to a live chamber feed. The Emergency Joint Civil Assembly on the planet below. Representatives from station unions, merchant guilds, relief corps, and house citizens packed the floor. No admirals on the dais. No nobles. Sorith stood. "I have to testify." She took 1 step, stopped, and looked back at him. "If I claim command now, half the fleet will obey from fear, and half will rebel from principle. So I am giving temporary strategic authority to that tribunal." Elena blinked. "Voluntarily?" "Yes." "That's either the bravest thing I've ever heard or political suicide." "Probably both." On screen, her name was called. Sorith moved to the doorway, then returned abruptly and pressed her forehead to his for a brief, fierce second. Jastery, intimate gesture, no witnesses that mattered. "Do not die while I am in committee," she murmured. "No promises." Her mouth twitched. "Make one." He swallowed. "I'll try." "Acceptable." She left. Elena watched the feed as Sorith entered the chamber without escort and set her command baton on the civilian clerk's desk. The room went silent. She spoke for 22 minutes, naming names including her own, detailing failures including her own, and formally requesting independent prosecution over discretionary battlefield executions carried out under her seal in prior campaigns. No spin, no excuses. When she finished, she stepped back from the dais and did not touch the baton again. In the ward around Elena, people who had cursed her title hours earlier stood anyway. Turning points were rarely clean. This one was loud, public, and irreversible. 3 weeks later, under a gray Earth sky, Elena stood on a balcony outside the Interstellar Assembly Annex and tried not to fidget with the borrowed formal jacket pulling at his shoulder scars. Below, reporters clustered behind barriers. Above, shuttle lanes traced pale lines over the city. He heard soft boot steps and turned. Sorith approached in diplomatic attire that blended matriarch cut with neutral insignia. No war paint, no black spear armor, hair braided with a narrow silver thread signifying witness under oath. She stopped an arm's length away. "You look uncomfortable," she said. "I'd rather reroute a burning reactor." "Noted. We can set one on fire if it helps." He laughed, then sobered. "How bad is it in there?" Hostile questions. Some honest, some performative. Your human senators are offended we have not yet apologized in exactly their preferred phrasing. My House observers are offended I have apologized. Good means both sides are listening. Her expression softened. "Elena, before we go in, there is a matter I will not put on a witness stand." He braced against the railing. "Okay." She drew in breath like someone stepping onto a battlefield with no armor. "I was trained to make people fear me. It worked. It also made solitude feel like competence. Then you boarded my disaster of a life and argued with me while bleeding. You boarded my ship, technically." Details. A faint smile. Gone quickly. "In the spindle, when your biosigns dropped, I discovered the specific shape of terror reserved for losing one person. Not one battle. His chest went tight. "I do not know how to do this softly," she said. "I know duty. I know vow, so I will speak plainly. I want a life that includes you when there is no emergency to justify it." He looked away toward the skyline because looking directly at her hurt in a different way than Burns did. "I've been trying not to say that first." "Why?" "Because you're rebuilding a government and I'm a former blacklisted engineer with a talent for pissing off powerful people." She stepped closer. "Those are, in fact, among your appealing traits." He huffed a laugh that almost broke. "Sorith." He turned back to her. "I loved my old crew. Not romantically, family. Losing them rewired me. After that, I kept everything transactional because if you don't need anyone, no one can be used against you. Then you showed up bleeding in my cargo hold and started issuing orders with a punctured lung." Her eyes shone, unshed. "I'm tired of pretending this is just shared trauma and competent logistic." He said, "I love you. I love that you choose law when power would be easier. I love that you terrify warlords and thank DocTex by name. I even love that you critique my flight vectors while half-conscious." A tear slipped down her cheek. She ignored it like an irrelevant weather event. He reached for her hand, paused. "If we do this, it gets political immediately. It already is. Human civil registry won't recognize some matriarch rights. Then we write a treaty appendix and make them." He barked a laugh. "Of course that's your answer." "It is one answer." She tightened her grip on his fingers. "Another is simpler. Stay." He stepped in, close enough to feel her breath. "I'm staying." They kissed with the awkward certainty of people more used to triage than tenderness, then with less awkwardness, and finally with the kind of deliberate commitment that felt like signing your name where it counted. When they parted, Elena rested his forehead against hers, smiling helplessly. "So, what does commitment look like in your house?" "Public vow before witnesses, exchange of navigational rights, and a shared blade oath." "Blade?" "Ceremonial. Usually no blood." "Usually." She gave him a look. "Do not panic, rescue engineer." He squeezed her hand. "Not panicking, cataloging exits." "Good," she whispered, and kissed him again just as an aide opened the door and pretended not to see. The award hall on Luna smelled faintly of polish and recycled air. Elena stood under two bright lights while the Interstellar Rescue Corps director pinned the Meridian Cross to his jacket and reinstated his credentials with the old words he thought he'd never hear again. "Engineer Elena Rodriguez," the director said, voice carrying across the chamber, "for civilian extraction under sustained fire and evidentiary actions preventing mass casualty fraud. Welcome back." Applause hit him like impact. He spotted faces in the crowd. Former colleagues who had believed him, some who hadn't. Survivors from Convoy Delta, clutching small flags. Pasha, with her arm in a sling, and an expression daring anyone to call her heroic. A memorial panel at the rear listed names from Gate 27, including Dockmaster Terran. Elena touched two fingers to it on his way off stage. Later that evening, in a smaller chamber lined with living moss and thin brass lamps, the marriage rite began. Human registrar on one side, Justari House Witness on the other. Joint Navigation Authority charter spread on a table between them. Transparent protocols and open audit clauses glowing in legal blue. The practical backbone both of them had fought for. Sorith wore deep black with silver thread. Elena wore formal charcoal and the same battered ring on his hand that had once held a cutter tether. They stood facing each other, palms up. The Justari witness presented a short ceremonial blade. "By house custom, speak your bearing." Sorith took the blade first, pressed it lightly to her thumb, and let a single bead of blood mark the steel. "I was called Blackspear," she said, voice steady. "Today I bear witness instead of fear." She passed the blade to Elena. He copied the motion, winced, and muttered, "I still hate paperwork less than knives." A ripple of laughter eased the room. He lifted his gaze to hers. "I was taught that one wrong coordinate can ruin a life. You taught me a right one can rebuild two." They exchanged navigation bands, hers etched with Sol Standard Starfix code, his with Justeri route knot script. The human registrar cleared his throat, suspiciously emotional. "Under Earth civil law and recognized Treaty Extension 17C, I record this union." The House witness struck the floor once with a staff. "Under matriarch, right, witnessed and binding." Applause, then cheers, after they slipped out to the docking balcony where Earth hung huge and blue beyond the glass. Elena leaned on the rail, finally breathing. Sorith came beside him, shoulder touching shoulder. "Tomorrow we review the first public release of joint warp charts." "Tomorrow," he agreed. "Tonight we eat something not from a ration pouch." A bold agenda. Below them, shuttle lights moved in calm, predictable arcs. No siege markers, no kill cones. Elena glanced at her. "You know, the first thing I felt the day this started was my teeth slamming together when Warp dumped me wrong." She studied him. "And now?" He smiled, small and real. "Now it's your hand. Same jump. Better arrival." She threaded her fingers through his. Together they watched the traffic lanes, open, audited, and finally honest, carry families home.